Hi, I'm Dave. Kite and I have teamed up with U.S. Captain's Training to bring you a vlog about interesting people in the boating world. Neil from U.S. Captain's Training was able to join us on this one as we talked to Dan and Marlene Reesner about their 2.5-year trip around the world. They sailed 48,000 miles. Dan ran a couple marathons along the way. Talked to them about the time they got hit by a whale, some food prep, their inspiration for sailing around the world. There's a lot of stories in here. This is a long episode, great to listen to as a podcast. Thanks. Enjoy.
Now we don't know what to talk about after a whole weekend of talking. The mental prep of ocean sailing, comparing it to marathon running and fitness and nutrition at sea and food. Food prep and for passages, all that.
So, for anything, something's got to be an inspiration.
Yeah.
Sorry, turn it off.
Doing good.
So I often compare marathon running to the preparation and everything for my first marathon to preparing for the sailing boat trip, and because they're both a real challenge. So I can't believe I'm when I used to run a lot around Lake Galena at Peace Valley Park near Chalfont and Doylestown. I'd go there and run a lap, run another lap, the next day. One summer I was running quite a bit, and I happened to notice this lady early in the spring also running. Almost every time I went up there, she was there running. And she was kind of overweight and running very slow, so I'd just blow by her. Well, by the end of the summer, she was much more slimmed down and running much faster. And I stopped one time on the lap and I said to her, I see you up here for the last 4 or 5 months, and she goes, oh, I'm preparing for the Philadelphia Marathon. And I go, man, if she can do it, I could do it. Because I was a runner, but I never really, I never thought someone, mediocre, if you will, could do a marathon. But it turns out you can't, And I had in my mind I had to run 8-minute miles too to do a marathon. It turns out you don't need to run 8-minute miles to do a marathon, because I never did, even though I've run over 40 marathons. So, but anyway, it took a lot to do that first marathon, because I was gearing up to do it, and in the winter I hurt my knee playing hockey. Had an operation. About 4 months later, I could finally run again. Gearing up to do it, and then something else happened. Oh,
was there a little girl at the park?
Yeah, I had in my mind that I had to run 8-minute miles for some reason, and so I was ready to run the Philadelphia Marathon. And I said, well, if I can run 8-minute miles for 26.2 miles, I'll do it. I'll sign up and actually run for it. And so I went out there one day. It was late in the year. It was October. The race is November, and had my son out there in our van going around the park, giving me water and snacks along the way, and which was nice. Just like in the park has rest stops, so I could take a rest stop if I needed to. So anyway, I'm on my last lap, and all the 3 laps, I've noticed this large group of Oriental people playing volleyball, having a big picnic and stuff, kind of up on the hill, a little bit away from the waterfront. The sidewalk there runs right around the waterfront. On my last lap, I'm running along, and here they are. They're still playing and stuff like that. And I'm running along, and I notice a little Oriental girl down by the rocks, down by the lake, all by herself. And I go, oh man! And I kept running, and I'm on time. I'm doing good. And turns out, I run by her, and then I finally say, shoot, if I don't stop, I'm going to read about this in the newspaper, because nobody knew she was there, So I finally stop. I go to talk to her. Of course, my tongue was swollen after running, over 18 miles, and I couldn't say much. Of course, she couldn't understand me anyway. But anyway, I was able to scare her away from the waterfront and up toward the group, but there was a little knoll in between, so they couldn't see her, but they could see me, So I'm hollering to them, and they're going, yeah, and finally she got up high enough where they saw her, and they come running down, and thank you. And okay, so I get back on and start to run again, and I couldn't get started, so I didn't run it that year, And finally I read more about marathons and realized you don't have to do 8-minute miles to do a marathon. And so the next year I finally geared up again, and again you have to worry about nutrition. I was running 18 miles at a time. I got really bad IT band problems getting ready for it. So I would run 18 miles on a weekend, and then it was Advil and ice till around Thursday or Friday. I'm thinking, okay, I'm never going to do this. But then by Saturday, oh, okay, I feel good again. Go out again, run 18 miles, Advil and ice. That lasted for about, 2 months. And finally I was going to quit and just not even try it. And then all of a sudden I went out to run it again. It didn't hurt. And it hasn't hurt since. And I ran that first Philadelphia Marathon. Didn't do 8-minute miles, but it was still very respectable. 3 hours and 42 minutes, I think, which is anything under 4 hours I consider respectable.
So what year was that?
It took me about 3 years before I finally ran it after talking to that lady. So.
Yeah. So what year did you run it?
What year? Around 2000, maybe 1998, 1999, around then. Yeah. I have to look at my t-shirt too. So I got a drawer full of marathon t-shirts, so anyway. So yeah, I can't remember what year it was, but it took me about 3 or 4 years before I finally got up and actually ran it. So it took a lot of mental and physical and everything preparation. So
and it
drained you.
It compared to getting ready for your around the world sale.
Yeah. So here's what inspired me for that. The book by Tanya.
No.
What's her last name? Okay.
I think
yeah.
Abbie.
Right. Maiden Voyage. So I read that book when I was in my early 30s, and it's about a young girl who sailed around the world trying to break the record for being the youngest person to sail around the world. And she did sail around the world by herself. Okay. And again, I'm thinking, heck, if she can do it, I could do it. So that's what put that bug in me. And I was doing big boat sailing, if you will, all around Lake Ontario. So overnight sailing for the longest race we did was 4 days, sailing all types of conditions. When you race, you sail in no wind and whatever it gives you when you're racing. And so that put the bug in my ear. So I started preparing for it way back then in my 30s. And finally it wasn't until, 65 or 66 when we 65-ish when we left on the voyage. Mentally preparing, reading all kinds of books about it. I became a sailing instructor because I knew that being a sailing instructor would help me learn more about sailing. The best way to learn about something is to teach something, So I became actually a U.S. sailing instructor first, teaching the U.S. sailing courses, and then I became an American Sailing Association instructor. Then I got my captain's license again, just to learn more and more all about sailing. Reading all types of books about sailing adventures and so forth, and learning stuff, how to do that type of thing. And just mentally preparing for this whole thing. And I felt very comfortable about it. Now, it took me about 20 years to convince Marlene.
I was just going to ask, that was Marlene. What was your mental preparation?
Because I was telling her about this, and like many people, I don't believe you. Yeah, right. Tell me another one, But finally, it happened, and go ahead.
Well, it was Father's Day 2018.
Yeah.
Right? I said, let's go to the local arts festival.
A couple weeks before that.
And he's like, first he says yes, and then he goes,
a couple days later.
He goes, well, it is Father's Day. Why don't we go looking at boats? And I'm like, okay, we'll go look at boats.
At big boats.
Big boats. So we went looking at big boats. We came down to Rock Hall and looked at, in the area, not just Rock Hall. We looked at least, 10, 12 boats. Mm-hmm. And Dan said, which one do you like the best? And I said, well, I kind of like that Green Island Packet. That was a really nice boat. I like all the wood on the inside.
It was an Island Packet 370.
Yeah, and Dan really liked the Island Packet. And so we're talking about it on the way home, and we're deciding, well, maybe we should make an offer on it. And
well, it was more like maybe we should find how many 370s are out there and figure out which one we might want to buy.
Yeah. So Monday I go to work and I'm Googling
at work.
Island Packet yachts for sale on Chesapeake, whatever. And I find there's a 420, which this is the 420, for sale in Annapolis. So I sent him the link and I said, "Do you think you can get Jack, who is our broker? Can you think we can go look at this boat next weekend?" And Dan's like a little kid in a candy store, and he was so excited. And I like this boat because it has two heads, and if we're sailing with family or friends, it's just nice to have more room, more heads. And it was bigger,
Smoother.
Yeah, heavier. So this is the boat we ended up buying.
Yeah.
So, but the funny part was, Dan, looking at the specs on paper, liked everything he saw. He said, "This is like the perfect boat." So he goes, "When we go there, don't let on to Jack that this is the boat we want." And so what does he do? He's like, "This is like, it's got this, and it's got, this is like the perfect boat." It's like, I'm like, "You just like blew our cover." You blew the cover.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
it worked. And then after that, Marlene was actually more enthusiastic about the trip than I was.
Really?
Everybody we came across, she goes, "We're going sailing around the world." And I'm thinking, I don't want to tell everyone that yet. We're going, everybody. And she was so enthusiastic about it.
I gave my boss a 1-year notice.
Yeah, more so than I was.
A
It
year
was-
notice I'm giving you. We're
Yep.
going to sail around the world. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, sure.
Yep.
I'm like, and then 11-month notice, 10-month notice.
Every month.
May of
Put
the
a
year
new
we
motion.
left, I said, "You guys want to come out on the boat?" So I brought the whole office out on the boat. And I said, November, we're leaving. We're going to go sail around the world on this boat. And they're like, "Wow, you really are going to go, aren't you?" So,
Yep. It was
So-
great.
Kinda
So
funny.
she really kicked in. Once we did the boat
Once we
shopping
saw
and
the
boat
boat.
looking, once we made an offer on the boat, then we go, "Oh no, what do we do now?" You know,
well, we're going to sail around the world.
we had to find a place to keep it and everything else, and then
And we went marina shopping.
we went marina shopping. We found Tolchester Marina, which we really liked because access to open water, like within 5 minutes after we leave our slip, and relatively new floating docks that were put in the year before. And floating docks just gives you peace of mind when you're parking your boat and you have to go home for the weekend or whatever. So that we picked up the boat in late July, early August in Annapolis, sailed it up here, and then virtually every weekend we could, because we were still working, we came down, sometimes by ourselves, often with friends or family members, to go sailing with them, because we wanted to convince others that really we were doing this and that we weren't totally crazy. And most of them still thought we were somewhat crazy.
Yeah.
But they kind of got it, they kind of got it that, okay, you'd be safe about it, and us talking about it and everything, and what we're doing to prepare for it. So we the rest of that season, we were getting ready for it. Then in winter, we put the boat up on the hard. Had a few things we did to the boat, not too much, because it came equipped very well for ocean sailing, had all the instrumentation and things to go along with it. Next summer, we were the first boat in the water, and same thing, every weekend, virtually, we were down here, except we had to go to 2 weddings, I think.
Yeah.
Sailing with friends and family the whole time, and getting familiar with the boat.
Some of our boat neighbors would say, "Yep, there they go out practicing again."
Yeah, that's what they'd say. Practicing,
We're
yep.
practicing.
Yep. In the spring, we took, in June of that year, 2019, we took a shakedown cruise, if you will, where we left the marina, went up across the C&D Canal, the Chesapeake Delaware Canal, down the Delaware River, out into the Atlantic Ocean, went all the way around Long Island, sailed or motored down Long Island. We hit a nice storm coming down Long Island. Just a lot of wind and rain, not too much. And then the fog kicked in big time. That's where we learned how to use a radar, okay, which was kind of nice. We were seeing everything on radar. The radar was so thick we could barely see the pulpit at the front of the boat, and Marlene was getting a little nervous. So I said, we're sailing right by where we race our thistle. I know this area. Let's just go in there and anchor. So we went in and anchored for the night. Going in there, we're seeing these red dots on the radar, because I had a feeling where we were, but we're seeing these red dots on the radar. And we said, okay, we'll just park next to those 2 boats. Okay, so we did. We anchored between those 2 boats, and next thing in the morning we wake up, no boats, but we saw these regulatory buoys, which by the way show up really well on radar. There must be some metal reflectors in these regulatory buoys, so they show up on radar. So then we popped up anchor really early in the morning, bright sunshine, and went through New York City, through Hell's Gate, out the other side.
Selfie in front of the Statue of Liberty.
Yep, motored through a little bit of downtown, and then back out into the ocean. And by the time we went back in the ocean, it was dark again. And ships coming out of New York City are very interesting because, you know, they have their paths that they're supposed to maintain, and they go quite fast. And that's again how we learned to use the AIS very well, and our radar, seeing the ships, making sure we're crossing them safely. A couple of them we radioed to, and they realized better than we were that, yeah, you're going to go behind us. You know, we're clear by half. Because AIS, it'll tell you the closest point of approach, but it doesn't say if you're going in front of them or behind them, or whatever. If they're on a opposite course, you just don't know. I think now we have a much better feeling for if they're going to go in front or behind, but back then we just didn't know. And so the ships have a more sophisticated AIS, and I believe they can tell better that way. So yeah, he was telling us, yeah, you're going behind us, and we're going to miss by about a half a mile. And so that's fine. Well, I wouldn't cross in front of a ship a half a mile because in case something happens, but I don't have a problem going anywhere around the ship a quarter mile, but I just wouldn't cross that close in front of a ship because they go a lot faster and they're bigger. So we learned a lot about AIS and radar. We continued to sail down the whole Jersey shore, and then back up the Chesapeake Bay, back to Tolchester. That was an 8-day voyage over, what do we say, 700 miles? Because we were moving the whole time except for that. Except for that anchor. And at the end of that, I knew we could do it. You know.
And we took 2 of our kids were with us.
Yeah. Yep.
And their spouses, no, it was just, well, Rachel, Ben's wife, they were really nervous because they lost contact with us, and it's like, oh, I guess people need to know where we are.
Right.
So that's like, okay, we have to be able to communicate
when we're out
in the ocean.
Yeah, because we lost cell phone.
Yeah.
You know,
so
once we got 8 or 10 miles from shore, you lose your cell phone range. So we said, okay, we have to have a means of communication. So we ended up getting a Garmin InReach, which solved that problem because with that, you can track with that, and it tells you exactly where you are.
And you can text.
You can text back and forth. You can and get some weather reports with it too. So that solved that problem, helped solve that problem, gave them peace of mind and us peace of mind as well. Right. We also learned on that voyage, the other main thing was our battery bank wasn't enough to work its way through the night. So 3 big things that consume battery power, I think I might have mentioned it before even, was our radar, autopilot, and the refrigeration. And by morning, the batteries were quite weak. So I added 2 new house batteries, and for the most part, we were fine with battery power through the night. We also have a wind generator, which when it's windy, we're definitely no problem through the night with the extra batteries. So that was our first voyage, and like I said, felt really good that, yeah, we can do it, okay? Practice every weekend through the summer, if you will, with friends and family. One of my sister-in-laws still thinks we're crazy for doing it.
Yeah, my brother also.
Yeah, did another good shakedown cruise in the fall, early September, where we just went out to Chesapeake Bay, rounded a weather buoy, went around a weather buoy, went searching for another weather buoy, which we never actually saw the weather buoy, but supposedly we were right on top of it. I don't know if they sink them during the day or something or what, but we were...
It was also right after a hurricane.
It was after a hurricane, and we had the GPS position for it, and we were supposedly right on top of it, but maybe the hurricane moved it, and somehow the GPS wasn't updating. So actually, it was kind of interesting. That's right. We were right in the GPS position, and then
we saw it on AIS.
All of a sudden, it showed up on AIS about 10 miles south of us, which is kind of odd because the Gulf Stream goes north, and so did the hurricane, but maybe it got the back wind of the hurricane or something, I don't know. So all of a sudden, it showed up on AIS about 10 miles from us. But we were kind of a little bit time constrained, so we didn't want to go and actually see it and headed back in. because there was some weather coming, and we wanted to be back in before that weather hit. And made it back in. That trip was 7 days, and again felt really comfortable about everything after that trip, especially because on that trip we crossed the Gulf Stream successfully back and forth, and understood a little bit about current and how the boat responded and pointed well, into the current. So we were going straight, but you're actually going sideways,
Yes.
and made it across the Gulf Stream no problem. So.
And then, so you had your RV too. Did that have anything to do with
It did.
preparing
So
for this?
we purchased the RV several years ahead of time.
Before the boat?
Before the boat.
Before the boat.
Yep. And again, that was, in my mind, a way to help prepare for the mechanics and the electronics and the things of the boat are similar to what's in an RV. Like the electronics, the battery, maintaining the batteries, the heads, the refrigeration system, the stove system and stuff. There's a lot of common systems in the RV as there are in a boat. So just becoming kind of familiar with those systems was a big plus, because you have to take care and maintain all those systems when you're out there. So we did sell the RV just prior to leaving on our trip. So
It's kind of like when we bought a lawnmower with a brake and a gas pedal. It made all the kids mow the lawn before they could get a permit to drive a car.
before they got a driver's license. The lawnmower I searched for and found had very similar gas and brakes, which are very uncommon for lawnmowers.
Yeah.
Most lawnmowers you release to get it to go. This one you had to press the gas to get it to go.
So they all had to mow the lawn.
Yeah, prior to getting
Driving
their
lessons.
driver's license.
So you two were getting in really deep at this point, to the point where you sold your house,
We did sell our house.
right?
Yeah.
That's a huge leap.
Yeah.
Yep. We
How'd that
we
look?
put it up for sale in the fall. So we set a date to leave on this trip the Saturday after Thanksgiving in 2019
At 12 noon.
at 12 noon.
Ah,
And the one reason we chose that because we had a big family reunion for Thanksgiving, and people were like saying goodbye.
We may never see you again.
Yeah.
nice knowing you.
Yeah.
They
So
gave us an autograph. Wilson, they all signed it.
Yeah.
Said in case you never,
Like
you
in,
never need this.
like in the movie, wasn't it?
Outcast.
Yeah, the Outcast movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had Wilson made it back in this time, so we set that deadline. Because I read several books. If you're never ever going to be 100% prepared for something like this, so don't even try. Just get comfortable and then leave. And you'll figure things out as you go. Because so many people have said they're going to do a trip like this, they try to get prepared and they just never, cast off. They never throw the lines back on the dock. And so I set that time, and sure enough, we had the last month or so we didn't even come down to the boat because we had to deal with selling the house and cleaning the house and getting rid of it and packing up and everything.
We left a lot of it for our kids to do. We said,
Yeah.
"Okay, you have to finish cleaning out the house, clean the house.
Our kids were really good about that. Yep. And
So you sold. So right before you left, you sold the house.
we moved out.
We
Yep.
moved out, but it
On
wasn't.
Friday.
It didn't settle till January.
On Friday before
Yeah.
Saturday we left, we moved out of the house. And so we come down here with our Honda Pilot, just chock full of stuff from the house, with our trailer. You've probably seen our trailer,
Yeah.
chock full of stuff, and we moved it all onto the boat. Okay?
Boxes
It was
everywhere.
this high throughout the boat of stuff. Okay? The TV wasn't installed. There was 3 weeks or 4 weeks, 5 weeks before. I go to get the water maker fixed, okay, because they were or not even fixed to test it out, okay. And we learned in testing it out. Craig Smith and we took the boat down to Annapolis to a guy who works on the water makers. He goes to run the water maker, and which had never really been properly commissioned, and the pump had a leak in it. Okay, so we ordered a pump. That pump was sitting here. On that trip, the inverter, almost burned the boat down. All of the before we had on those weekend trips, we were always testing things out. And every time I tried to run the inverter, it just didn't seem right. Sometimes it would work, sometimes the toaster wouldn't work, that type of thing.
Pop fuses.
So we're about to leave, and Craig goes up to the bathroom, you know. So I think, oh, I'll try the inverter again just before we leave. So I turn the inverter on, hit the toaster, crack, boom, bang, you know, smoke comes billowing out of the electronics panel. The inverter's down underneath, and I thought for sure we're going to lose the boat, you know. I unscrew these screws here, open it up, get the fire extinguisher. I'm looking for the flames and never saw the flames, so I didn't pull the trigger, and it just smoked like crazy. Craig comes back and goes, "What happened?" You know, because it smelled like crazy. So anyway, we didn't try the inverter anymore, and I get down to this place, and sure enough, the guy looks at the inverter, and it was fried. So that was another box sitting here when we left along this pile of stuff, you know, and so we just unloaded everything else in the house, and like I said, we were nowhere near prepared to leave, and we left anyway, and it turned out great.
Not only that, think about all the food you have in your house, like every
all the
canned
leftover
goods,
stuff.
every bit of boxed canned food that all came on the boat.
Yeah.
Everything that was in the house.
Yep,
came
those
on the
doors
boat.
were in a package. We didn't install those until we got to Panama. The cover, the enclosure all around the back. We had the material to make the enclosure, the zippers, and we actually had to buy more zippers on the way. We had a sewing machine, but that was stacked all over the place. Danielle could barely sleep in there. There was barely enough room for her, but she did. Marlene and I and Danielle took off. The three of us took off on this trip together, and after the first night, we went 24 hours south to the bottom of the bay. There was a storm coming, so we had to get into this marina prior to the storm hitting, and we made it. And just as the storm was hitting and the winds were kicking up around 20-25 miles an hour as we're approaching this marina, and we realized we've only ever docked the boat at this marina.
Yeah.
And it was so easy here because of the, you know, you've been, you know, the big space between, and it's always calm in here. Mm-hmm. Well, we had 25 knot winds coming behind us, blowing us into this marina with the current, okay? Oh, yeah. And so we radio in, the guy tells us to go in down this runway and then park in. Well, little did I know that going in with the wind and current is like the worst way to try to park a boat, you know? You always want to go against the wind and against the current, right? So this first landing, we come around, we go into the runway, and the boat skids sideways, and ends up on the two pylons, just like this. It's just stuck there. And we're trying to wiggle it back and forth to get it out, and it took us about, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour. We finally did and get the boat into the slip. Actually, we went into the next slip eventually, you know. And the two dock hands were sitting there, and it was raining, okay? And I go, "Was that the worst docking you ever had?" He goes, No. You guys are still alive. Nobody hurt, you know. Everything's fine. The boat's fine. We've seen a lot worse than that, you know. Next to us was another boat. I don't know if you want to hear this story, but we'll tell it anyway. Was another boat. Remember their names? They were the people who founded the Salty Dog Rally, okay? Yeah. Way back in the 70s. And Knowles, yeah. And that's a rally where they would gather boats together and go all the way down to Antigua together every fall, okay? So he was looking out his porthole the whole time we were trying to park, you know, and really nervous because we ended up right next to him. It was late afternoon, and we asked them if they wanted to go to dinner with us, and of course they refused. But they said, "How about drinks afterwards?" So we said, "Yeah, okay." So we went back, brought a bottle of wine over and drinks with them, and we had no idea who they were, but they introduced themselves and they talked about the salty dogs and stuff, and then we told them what we were going to do, and they go, "Really?" You know, and he asked about our credentials and stuff, and I told him what we did and everything else. You guys. You need more experience to do it. You need to join. No, we wouldn't even allow you to join the Salty Dogs rally. You don't have enough experience to even join the Salty Dogs rally. And we go, well, you might be right, but we're going to do it anyway. Yeah. And we did. And we were planning to go out in the ocean the whole time, and we used a weather router to go down to Florida. Our next stop was supposed to be Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but it got too windy out there. In fact, 3 boats were lost, 2 lives were lost during that time, and so I was glad we stayed in the ICW out in the ocean. It was really bad weather. It's a nor'easter, big nor'easter, kicking up against the Gulf Stream to get the big waves and cause all kinds of havoc out there. So we're glad we listened to Chris Parker and went down the ICW all the way until Charleston. Then we finally did go out for a while and then back in. So anyway, the whole way down the ICW, we're putting stuff away and finally got it to where we could walk through the boat and we had the water maker finally installed in Panama. Had a guy come on board and check it out, and it was working fine. And got the TV installed, got the doors installed, and slowly, worked our way so that the experience was just amazing, So. Yeah. So setting a date, was part of the mental preparation, and then sticking to it was another, because we didn't have any other place to live anyway, because we were selling our house.
Or the RV.
We sold the RV.
So we had the RV sold before then and everything. Yep.
We sold our cars, so we didn't even have a car.
Yep.
You had no choice.
We didn't have anything. Yeah. We had a boat.
That was the plan. We just cold turkey, and here we go.
Wow.
So, and
Love it.
it worked out well.
Yeah.
So.
Love it.
So then, on top of all that, you ran marathons along the way.
Yeah, so one of my goals in life was to run a marathon in every state. Okay, so we're thinking, this might be a good opportunity to just go up and do Alaska. Okay, because it's so far out, maybe save some money with the flight.
By a boat to sail around the world, you save money on not flying to
That's a
Alaska.
hard way to say it.
Yeah.
So I actually kept an Excel spreadsheet that says we have this many miles to go. We have to be at this place, this location at this date and time in order to make it to Anchorage
For the marathon. Yeah.
And at one point, I discovered we're not gonna make it. We're gonna have to leave the boat and fly to Alaska.
Yeah, which was
to
part of
do
the
it.
plan. If we have
Which
to, we were
is-
gonna,
If we did, that would be okay too. We could do that. But-
and just do the marathon. But then COVID hit. So we were traveling, and we heard about COVID when we were in Panama, but nobody really knew what it was at that point. Luckily, we got through the canal before Panama closed down, because if you didn't get through the canal, several boats that wanted to go through the canal from the Caribbean to the Pacific, or vice versa, were locked down for 3 or 4 months. They just
In
couldn't
Panama,
move.
yeah.
And many people we talked to were also locked down for 3 or 4 months or even longer. Because of where they were, or they had to leave their boat and leave the country. We heard a lot about that, and some of those people had to leave their boat and they couldn't get back to their boat for over a year later. Many people heard about that. But we were just by luck, very fortunate. We got through Panama Canal, started working our way up north, bumping through the different countries. In Mexico, it started to hit the fan, and definitely by the time we got to Puerto Vallarta, it really hit the fan. A lot of the stores and restaurants and everything were closed, just like you folks were all living through. We're hearing all the lack of toilet paper stories and stuff, although in the stores we were going to, what are you talking about? There's a pallet full here.
Yeah.
We took pictures of them, sent them back to our kids.
And we ended up in Cabo. Cabo was a ghost town.
Yeah.
A little ghost town.
Everybody we talked to and said and read about, they said, don't go to the marinas in downtown Cabo, because
it's kind of cool. There's big screens. It's loud. There's a lot of bars.
the noise till 4 o'clock in the
Total
morning. You never
silence.
get a sleep. You never get any rest. Just don't go there. Well, we go there. It was dead silent. There was one restaurant open in the whole place, and the police were there every day trying to get that guy to close. And and he didn't close by the time we left. So that was fortunate. And by that time, a couple of friends of ours, John Baker and Joy Martin, joined us, and they're thistle sailors also. So we knew they could handle the wind and the waves of the West Coast. That you get a lot of wind and current coming from the south, and we didn't know how we were going to handle it, even because many people told us it's impossible to go up the coast. You have to go to Hawaii and then back. That's the only way to go up the coast. But at the same time, I read people do go up the West Coast. A lot of West Coasters go up the West Coast.
We actually flew Spinnaker one day.
Yeah, going up the West Coast. So the wind switched on us, and it worked out great. We met a number of people. There was a Pacific puddle jump, again, a rally of people that go from the West Coast down and into the the Pacific French Polynesia, and they canceled that event, and so all these number of West Coast boaters, all the way from Los Angeles and even further north, San Francisco, they were heading back home. Even one couple from Washington, they're all heading back up, and they're going along the coast. So we talked to them about how to do it, and they said, yeah, you're going to have to motor sail a lot. And we learned how to motor sail this boat, which was really nice. You roll up the Genoa, deploy the staysail. You can bring it in really tight because of the staysail boom. You can bring in the main really tight, and you can, but depending upon the waves, you can sail about 15 to 25 degrees to the wind, to apparent wind. So you're actually motor sailing. So the sails are giving you a little boost, about a knot and a half, but you're really motoring most of the time. So we're doing that about 5 knots or so up the coast, but we did have to tack every so often. But we're making pretty good headway going up the coast, and we'd have to stop quite often for fuel, but that was okay. So we made it up through Mexico, because they all said, yeah, just keep on going. We got the COVID thing. Some places they wouldn't allow us to go to shore. Other places they would. Most of the places were closed. Of course, just like here, grocery stores were open. Drugstores were open. Some restaurants were open. One restaurant we went to in starts with an E.
Ensenada.
Ensenada, yep. He let us in, and he said, and we asked him if we could have dinner there, and he goes, yep.
Well, we were with like 4 other boats.
Right, 4 other people from other boats, not just the boats. And so he let us all in, and then he closed the blinds, he closed the doors so the police wouldn't see that there was people in there, and we were the only people in there. We had a really nice dinner, and they served us and stuff, so other people were very nice and accommodating along the way. We get to San Diego, and they said, yeah, you can come here and you can move on, but all the boats into San Diego Harbor couldn't go out because they were local. They were restricting them. But because we were from the East Coast transiting, they allowed us to continue on. So we didn't get hung up any place. We didn't get locked down. So we're bumping up the West Coast. We stopped in various places, had a good time in Newport. No, not Newport. Anyway, all the different towns all the way up. Barbara.
Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara was a great place. We had to wait there for almost a full 2 weeks, I think, maybe even longer, because of the Point Concepcion. A lot of wind comes down there, and it curves around and creates quite a hazard.
Like Hatteras.
Yeah. So you have to wait for a particular day when it's going to be calm. And actually, there are rarely any days that it's calm. It's typically in the middle of the night. So you're in Santa Barbara. You leave Santa Barbara when you think it's going to calm down. You go to a bay right near Point Concepcion, take a rest, take a nap, and at 11 o'clock you leave, and you get around Point Concepcion in the middle of the night. And it worked out well for us, although there were some waves there, but it still worked out well.
Bad.
There was a couple of other points like that we had to avoid the weather too. So
doing that at any point during COVID, when COVID was getting really bad, were you like, we shouldn't be doing this? Or
yeah, that affected us a lot. Or well, first, so we went to Alaska, back on the marathon thing.
Okay.
Mainly, we finally realized the Alaska marathon was COVID canceled also. We said, well, let's go to Alaska anyway. So we went to Southeast Alaska. We didn't go all the way to Anchorage, just Southeast Alaska, Juneau. The furthest north we went was in Glacier Bay National Park. COVID was actually a blessing for us when we were in Alaska, because we could get into places like Glacier Bay National Park and avoid the normal 6-month waiting list. To normally 6 months you have to in advance. You know, we call up, we say, hey, can we come in? They go, yeah, no one's here. Just come on anytime. Just show up. There's plenty of room.
And you can only stay for 7 days.
Yeah, no matter what, you still only stay for 7 days.
Yeah.
And but we could have turned around, I think, and gone right back in for 7 more days if we wanted to. So, but 7 days was a good visit there. We left there, went back to even before we got there. I in Juneau, I ran 26.2 miles on my own. Just so that's my Juneau Marathon. It wasn't, or Alaska Marathon. It wasn't official, but I ran it anyway. Yes. In fact, running on the sidewalks rather than in the roads. Okay, sidewalks sometimes have bumps in them. Well, I hit a bump and I face planted right there. Wicked black eye. Okay, but the people in Alaska are the friendliest people in the world. That's what we found. And right away, several cars stopped. Oh, can we help you? You okay? You know, that kind of thing. And I explained what I was doing, and they said, okay, you're crazy still, because people always thought. But I said, I gotta do this, you know. So I continued on. I kept stopping. There was this one place, a little store I would stop to get refreshments, and that guy must have seen this thing, because the first time I walked in, it was a little bruised. The last time I walked in, it was like this. Twice, not once, but twice, I'm running along this road, and I'm running along, and a car goes by, turns around, comes back, says, "Are you okay?" You know, because at that point my eye could barely see. It was so swollen. I could barely see, like a slit on my eye. It must have looked, or did look really bad. I said, "Okay, it's mile 22 now. I only got a little bit more left. Yeah, I'm gonna finish this thing." And twice that happened to me, where a car goes by, and not too often would that happen around here, you know. But I finished it. Okay.
So how do you step off a boat and run a marathon? Like, how do you stay fit?
Well,
sailing?
Every place, pretty much every port that we stopped at, I would step off the boat and run. Okay, whether it be 6 miles, 10 miles, 12 miles or whatever. I was trying to keep in shape while we were running. On the boat, we kind of all did exercises, especially during our night watches. We would take some time to do squats and push-ups and sit-ups and stuff like that, but you couldn't obviously run on the boat.
Chest press on a companion way.
Yeah. So we were exercising some while we were on the boat, and pretty much, like I said, every place we stopped running quite a bit. And Panama was tough because it was really hot, like in the 90s, and it's hard to run in the 90s and high humidity.
We also walked a lot.
Yeah.
We walked a lot.
Yeah, we're always walking to and from the grocery stores, to and from drugstores.
Pulling a wagon.
Yeah.
Sometimes
so,
2.5 miles one way.
Yeah, rather than take taxis or whatever, we're doing a lot of walking.
We walked.
Yeah. So, but once you've geared up to run one marathon, it's not too difficult to stay. You're already mentally prepared for it, so it's not too difficult to understand what it takes to run another one. Okay, so in Alaska,
what marathon was the Alaska Marathon for you?
Well, I ran it on my own.
No, but of the marathons that you had run before that.
That was 35, number 35.
Okay.
Yep, and then we got to Hawaii. That was number 36. So I did the same thing in Hawaii. I ran a marathon on my own because they were COVID closed as well. The Hawaii Marathon was. I didn't stop I didn't fall and hurt myself, but it was extremely hot and humid the day I'm running it. Okay, so what's the name of those stores again?
ABC stores.
ABC stores. They're like a 7-Eleven store. Okay,
yeah.
They're all over the place in Waikiki Beach. Okay, so I'm running essentially downtown Waikiki Beach, and the 7-Eleven stores, they keep their doors open, and they're very well air conditioned. Okay, so I just sit outside the door, calm down, cool down with the air conditioning. Run to the next ABC store, cool down, get the run to the next one. So my marathon in Hawaii was ABC store to ABC store, and just kept that route for 26.2 miles.
How did you figure out the route though to make it 26.2 miles?
So I before I ran both places, I did some running around the area, and I had a feeling for where bathrooms were and the ABC stores were and stuff like that, where I could get water. Okay, to do it on my own. So I had an idea, and then I had a watch, a Garmin watch that told me the distance. So I'd just keep an eye on my watch until, I was doing laps and things and running different places, and I'd doing out and back. Okay, that's 4 miles. Okay, and then all of them, it was actually more than 26.2. When I hit that, okay, I'm done, and went back to the boat.
Did you build in ever any recovery time for after the marathon?
Yeah, I mean, you take Advil for 3 days to get rid of the swelling.
Yeah.
And what's nice about running a marathon, most of them are on a Sunday. Well, the Thursday after a marathon, you feel like $100 because by that time the pain is gone and you're like 5 pounds lighter, and you just feel so invigorated. On the Thursday after a marathon, I always look forward to that day. So a little bit of downtime, and walking, but nothing other than that. Yeah. So
I've never run a marathon. Okay, so I could kind of see, you're training up the coast of the U.S. to Alaska, but then, your passage to Hawaii, that's That's
Right.
a stretch where you're on the boat.
That was
Not-
13 and a half days.
Yeah.
Yep, and very shortly after we got there, I'm running in Maui, on the island of Maui, doing some runs, and then it was about 4 or 5 weeks later when I finally did it in Honolulu. So I did some runs around Honolulu first and Waikiki Beach, prior to doing it. Then took about a 4-day race and then started up to do it. Yeah. So
any other marathons?
I haven't done any since.
Okay.
So since coming back, I've had some knee issues, and I think a lot of it was because I got an ear infection and I took quite a few antibiotics, and I don't know if sometimes when you take a lot of antibiotics, it messes with your joints, and I think that's what happened. Mm-hmm. So I'm still kind of getting back into running again since then. So not only the ear infection, but I got another infection last fall. Again, taking a lot of antibiotics, and I think that hurt my running. What's helping my running lately is playing a lot of pickleball. So we're in a retirement community with 3 pickleball courts, and that's making it's making my knee. It's actually smaller than it used to be. My knee used to have a lot of arthritis in it from ice hockey injuries. I played ice hockey since I was 3 or 4 years old all the way up till I was in my mid-50s. So I had ice hockey injuries on this one knee, and it's just feeling much better now. And when I go and run now, I'm feeling better. So I'm hopefully gear up for another marathon. So it's a challenge right now to do that. Yeah. So, but I know what it takes now. So
right.
Yeah.
So Marlene, how about your sailing experience before leaving?
Well, we raced thistles since like 1980, and that's basically my experience.
So what are thistles?
A thistle is a 17-foot one design racing boat. And it's at one point we were pretty competitive nationally.
Mm-hmm.
I think we placed
in the top third or top quarter almost at all the nationals.
at the big regattas. Yeah,
Yep.
we did really well.
Local fleet were always in the top 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So, but it's a big difference when you go to these big regattas. Thistle sailors nationally are very, very competitive.
Yeah, there's a lot of
world-class sailors.
world-class sailors in the thistle class.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Tom Hubble, who was president of U.S. Sailing, is a thistle sailor, and Mike Ingham, who is the Olympic sailing coach, is a thistle sailor.
Yep. Dave Dallenbaugh.
Dave Dallenbaugh, who is an America's Cup sailor, sails thistles.
Yep.
So there's a lot of big name competition.
And all of
in the
them,
class.
all of them grew up on a boat. Like I grew up on ice skates. They grew up sailing on a boat in a club. I didn't really start racing my own boat till I was 25-ish.
Yeah.
So for being not growing up in a boat, typically the top 20 guys, they all grew up sailing at these national regattas. There's only one other guy, John Baker, who didn't grow up sailing, placed in the top 5 ever of a national.
Yeah.
And then you did it as a family, like
We did.
your kids were into it.
The kids sailed also.
Almost. I had a rule that I wouldn't go sailing on my own unless a family member was with me, whether it be Marlene or one of the kids, and I rarely broke that rule. So it was always a family thing for us versus having some hot shots on the boat, sailing with me, that type of thing. So
What ages did your kids start getting into it?
5-ish, 6, 7,
They were young.
8, yeah.
On
Very
thistles?
young.
On the
Okay.
thistle,
Thistles,
yeah.
yeah.
And they for the most part all crew. They when they were younger, they didn't seem to have too much interest in steering the boat or skippering the boat,
Yeah.
but
Well,
they all had an
Luke
interest
did,
in
like
crewing.
in high school.
Yeah. In high school, Luke steered the boat, and I was his crew, and Ben. So Luke, Ben, and I were a pretty good crew together. I realized.
But
So when I
you
was
have to sit in the middle.
well, yeah, when I was skippering, the 2 boys were always fighting, So I finally said, okay, Luke, you steer, I'll be in the middle, okay, and Ben up front. So it worked out very well that way. Yeah.
Were they generally really into it, or did you have to coax them along the way?
They were into it because, especially at the regattas, it was very social for them.
Yeah, especially the national regattas.
Yeah, all the big regattas, there was always kids their age. They had friends around the country who we would see each other only during these big events, these regattas. Yeah. So the other experience we had together is chartering of boats. So the 2 of us chartered once, again, to preparation for our trip around the world. we started chartering bigger boats. We got friends of ours had a CNC 44 that they had charter with. So the first year, Marlene and I said, hey, let's charter that boat over Labor Day weekend. So for 3 days, we chartered the boat. The first year, we said, it's a pretty big boat. We don't know if we could handle that by ourselves.
And it was big. It's about the size of this boat.
Yeah. Okay. So that first time we chartered the 44 here on the Chesapeake Bay, we invited our kids, thinking maybe one or two of them might come with us to help us. Well, it turns out all of them wanted to come for the weekend, and so we had 10 people on the boat, and we had a riot with them. It was just so much fun.
At this point, they're all adults, though.
Yeah, they're all adults, no kids. Some of them were married, some of them have boyfriends and girlfriends, so we had a boat full of people, and it was just a lot of fun. And then in subsequent years, over Labor Day weekend, that was the thing. We were chartering that same boat. We did it for, 4 or 5 times, just to get familiar with the big boat anchoring out, that type of thing. So Marlene had that experience, which worked out quite well as a transition.
Yeah. And then there was one year, I don't remember what year it was, in the 20s.
What do you mean in the 20s?
At 2000 something.
Okay.
At Nakamixon, they had a Sunday series in addition to other racing.
Right.
Well, no, even before that, they have the ULDB, which is up the lake, down and back race. It's like a fun race.
Long race.
And so I skippered the boat that year.
She steered the boat.
I steered the boat.
I was still a skipper.
And I won the race. And then was it the same
Might
year?
have been the same year or a different year. Yeah.
Maybe the following year.
Yeah.
I said, well, let me do a series. So I skippered the entire Sunday series that summer. And there was one day that he wasn't going to be there. And I'm like, I think I still have to sail because I need to qualify for the Sunday series. So I got our daughter Danielle and a friend of ours who
another lady
sailed in college. And I basically needed her to be able to back the boat up into the water because I can't back up a trailer. So the 3 of us sailed on our boat, our Thistle, and we won 2 out of 3 races. And so I ended up winning the Sunday series. And so that was kind of cool.
And we believe it was the only female ever to win a series at
Nakamixon.
Lake Nakamixon Sailing Club.
Wow. Yeah.
So did Dan get you into sailing?
Yes.
Requirement of dating?
No, it was after we were married. He goes, we were married in...
Well, I was sailing the whole time we were dating.
Oh, our wedding date was the only weekend that summer he wasn't racing.
Yeah, where we didn't have a regatta.
It was not on the schedule.
Yeah.
It was the only open weekend, so that was the day we got married.
Yeah, but we did take a honeymoon, and I missed 2 other sailing days.
Yeah,
But yeah, so Marlene knew I was I was very much into sailing while we were dating, and then right after we got married,
he said, "You want to buy a boat?"
Right.
What do you mean a boat? What kind of boat?
Yeah. So that's when we bought a Thistle together.
A Thistle, yeah.
And sailed out of the Rochester Canoe Club.
Yeah.
Almost every weekend for 7 years in a row, we were sailing that Thistle.
Every weekend.
Virtually every weekend. And the kids we would bring down to the club.
With a babysitter?
Hire a babysitter or 2 sometimes. Bring babysitters to regattas, We'd have a tent for the kids, a tent for the babysitters, a tent for us, and schlep everything around. And we were very regular doing the whole Thistle sailing. So as you might know, sailboat racing really helps you become a good sailor, It really fine-tunes your sailing abilities, okay? However, something like this boat, we found the sailing not a problem, but all the other stuff, the mechanics, the electronics, everything else,
winches.
You had to learn, all that stuff. That was a big transition. And so that's why we were down here practicing virtually every weekend before we left on the trip.
Yeah. I think Luke was maybe 5 months old the first regatta he went to.
Yeah.
We brought him with a babysitter.
Yeah.
A 5-month-old.
Yeah, we would have to take 2 cars to the regattas, one to pull the boat and full of stuff, and the other one full of people,
Right.
So that's the way it was.
When you were you ever telling your kids officially, like, hey, Mom and Dad are going to sail around the world? Or was that just something that was always a conversation over the years?
I think we just sprung it on them. And I think they were shocked. In fact, our oldest daughter, Beth, was, I don't think I ever told you this. Her friend had a baby and she was in the hospital, and our neighbor was her nurse. Kathy was her nurse.
Kathy Dugan.
And Beth is in there, our daughter's in there crying her eyes out because she's thinking she's not going to see us for 3 years. And she was so upset that we were leaving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. She didn't tell us that. Beth didn't tell us that. But she cried to her friend that she was very sad that we were leaving.
Yep.
Yeah. But she didn't realize we could FaceTime, we could email, we could call. They never, we did a lot of FaceTime or like group FaceTime, kind of Zoomish, like with the kids.
Marlene says we sprung it on them, but probably, we were talking about a good 5 or so years prior to that. But it wasn't really until we got the boat where it became real serious.
Yeah.
And
it's
then,
like they heard us, but they weren't listening.
Yeah. And then the year of, in 2019, when we actually set the date, we're leaving November,
Well, originally it was going to be January.
Right.
And I'm so glad that didn't happen because
the
of
whole
COVID, the whole
schedule.
COVID thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So Danielle was coming with us, and Danielle's a CPA, and she had to get her master's degree, so she had like one class left to do, and it was supposed to be in the fall, and then she realized that she could take it during the summer and then graduate in September instead of January. So she was able to do that, and so we were able to leave in November as opposed to January because of her schedule.
Yeah.
So how much of your trip was with your kids?
Well, Danielle, you go ahead.
Danielle started with us, and then she flew home after we went through the canal in Panama.
Okay.
Because she told her boss she'd come home and help them do tax season.
Right. That's spring.
And then the plan was, after tax season in April, she was going to fly back to the boat and then continue around the world.
April or
with
May,
us.
we expected to hook back up in
like
San Diego.
And at the same time, our son's first child was to be born. And so the timing was perfect. I was going to fly home for the birth, be there a little bit. Dan was going to get a guys group, bash up the West Coast.
To
and then
San Francisco.
Danielle and I were going to fly back to San Francisco and join him. And then COVID hit, and it changed all of our plans. So we didn't do any of that. I never flew home. Cora was 2 years old by the time we met her. And so that was the premise of the book, was it's all about Cora.
So how much of the sailing and passage making was just the two of you?
So the first time we were out by ourselves was when we had friends with us all the way up to Costa Rica, and so they went back home, and then from Costa Rica was really the first time we were out in the ocean by ourselves from Costa Rica all the way to Puerto Vallarta.
And then John and Joy joined us.
Quite a ways, because not only distance-wise
so it's almost like all of Mexico.
But you also had to pass through the Papagayos and the Tehuantepec winds, right? Both of them to get there. And those are winds that really intensify as they come from the Caribbean to the Pacific over the mountains of Latin America, and then funnel down through and create this very intense wind. So that's where we learned, okay, you have to wait for the wind to settle down before you can make those passages. And each one, it took you about 24 hours to get across that area, but you had to time it just right. And what good news is, other people were doing the same thing. So we're meeting people along the way, talking about when to go, that type of thing. And so you'd be at a marina or someplace, and all of a sudden, everyone take off at the same time. And so you got instant buddy boats that we developed a lot of friendships along the way.
Yeah.
And so we sailed that by ourselves, and we did have a couple of overnight passages during that time. And we knew our friends were flying into Puerto Vallarta. So we had a little bit of a timeline to try and get there as soon as at a certain date, which we did. We made it there on time. And when their flight landed, they closed Puerto Vallarta Airport because of COVID right afterwards. So they were the last flight in. So luckily they joined us and stayed with us. Their plan was to leave us in San Diego. However, COVID closed all the sailboat regattas they typically go to and the ski resorts. So they said, hey, can we stay with you guys a while longer? So they stayed with us all the way up to San Francisco. And then another friend of ours, Rick joined us in San Francisco, and he sailed with us all the way to the state of Washington, to Seattle.
Yeah. Then we were alone from
Seattle
to
all the way
Alaska.
up through Alaska.
And then Craig joined us.
In northern Alaska in Juneau. So he sailed. Craig was with us. We sailed by ourselves for 1 week or so, and then Craig was with us the next 8 weeks
he
altogether.
joined us like around the 4th of July.
Yeah, about 7 or 8 weeks it was altogether.
Yeah, and then we went back to Washington State.
Yep, dropped off Craig, and my brother hopped on the boat. Okay, and he sailed with us down Washington State to Eureka, California. From there, we provisioned to go across the Pacific to Hawaii, and that was a 12.5 day or 13.5 day trip. And my brother Larry hung out with us in Hawaii for a while, and then when he left, pretty much the rest of our trip was by ourselves.
Yeah.
What, really?
Yeah.
So this is like November of 20.
Right.
November of 20 till the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So most of about 2/3 of the world was by ourselves, if not more.
So that first big passage from Hawaii, by just the two of you, was that like you're like, oh, we totally got this, or it's like, oh, it's just
Leaving
the two
from
of us now?
Hawaii?
Yeah.
Leaving Hawaii?
So we hung out in Hawaii a little longer than we expected because we kept trying to get permission to go into French Polynesia. They finally gave us permission to go into French Polynesia. So okay, fine. Looked for a weather window. And then right after Thanksgiving, or maybe it was
Just
Thanksgiving
like the
Day,
we
we left Hawaii and took off. Had a pretty good weather window, but it was kind of on the nose. So we were talking earlier about adjusting your course based on the wind. So we couldn't go right into the wind, and we had to sail because it's such a long distance. So so we were sailing more like 60 degrees because it was so windy, and I didn't want to go that far south. To go from Hawaii to French Polynesia, you have to actually go east quite a ways, and you really want to go way east and then down based on the weather. So anyway, we get across, and Marlene doesn't like, and neither do I, the boat to heel so much, but it was heeling a lot during that time. And then we get to the doldrums.
That's where the 20-degree rule
was took
created.
effect. Yeah.
Can't heel more than 20 degrees.
Yeah, and but we're doing a lot of motor sailing, going through the doldrums. We had to do a lot of motoring as well. So the doldrums is no wind or a little storm, no wind and a little storm, no wind and a little storm. That's what the doldrums was like going through there.
Yeah.
Get through the doldrums, and now you still have the trade winds that are against you. So you're trying to work your way as much as you can east, but the winds are strong, so you can't go into the wind, or you don't want to go into the wind. We finally get to the waters of French Polynesia, and we're tacking back and forth to get there. By that time, we couldn't use the engine too much because we were getting really low on fuel.
Yeah.
And we ended up going into Nukuhiva, anchorage there on fumes pretty much, and but luckily we made it. So it was a tough passage. That was probably the roughest, more difficult passage, both physically, mentally, and even on the boat.
Right. And I remember when we got off that one day, we went for a walk. I couldn't walk.
Yeah.
Like my legs were like, I cannot. I can't.
Except for going through the doldrums, we were bouncing the whole way.
Yeah.
It was a lot of wind the whole way, and mostly, if you will, on the nose, coming, trying to go close hauled, but to save a little comfort, we were going more like 50, 60 degrees rather than 40 degrees or something like that. So that was probably the worst passage of the whole thing. Now from there, you're in the normal route for people going around the world, cruising around the world. Now you're into trade winds, and the passages after that were quite pleasant.
Yeah.
Did you have a plan of how long this might take ahead of time?
2.5 years. Yep, and we almost to the day it was 2.5 years.
You originally said I committed to 2 years.
Yeah, well, Marlene said 2 years. Yeah. Then so I started to put a plan together based on climate,
And
hurricane season, typhoon season, that type of thing, and our goal to go to Alaska. I said, well, we really can't do it. In fact, we'll just barely miss the cyclone season, but we got to take 2.5 years. So I convinced Marlene 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And we did it almost to the day, 2.5 years. But one plan, think about it, we said, New Year, we're going to celebrate New Year's in Cape Town.
We did.
And we did. And of course, we left the next day, or that.
We did.
Yeah, the next day.
Yeah.
We left January 1st from Cape Town. So the timing, people, I actually shared my itinerary on a bunch of sites, and people, oh, you're crazy.
You can't have a
You
schedule.
can't sail by a calendar, this and that. And so almost anything you do out there, people are going to criticize, right? But yet some people were saying, you got to have some kind of plan. If you don't have a plan, you're never gonna again leave the dock. So we had a plan, and it was flexible. We stayed in Hawaii longer than expected. We didn't go all the way to Anchorage. We were flexible, and we knew we had to leave French Polynesia around a certain time. We knew we had to get around Africa we got to get to Africa by a certain time to avoid. So we had a concept, a plan, but we weren't necessarily on the calendar.
Right.
So
did you have a passage, or at any time you're like, we just need to go home, take a break, fly home, take a break for a couple months, like regroup, or like, are we really going to do this?
There was actually twice Marlene said, let's go home. And I said, okay, go ahead. I'm staying on the boat, and I'm going to finish this myself.
When did I say that? Was that like in...
Right after we dropped off Sue and Al in Costa Rica. You were driving back after the airport. After driving back, we're driving home. You said, we should go home. I mean, she wanted to take the boat back home. And I said, okay, go ahead. There's one other time we kind of said that. I never felt that way, except for COVID once. Like, we were in Hawaii waiting to get into French Polynesia. It was taking way too long, and we didn't know if we were ever going to get into French Polynesia. Yeah. And we're talking to each other, well, if it doesn't come through like in a couple of weeks, we're going back to either Mexico, because Mexico is a lot of fun and inexpensive, or to the west coast of the U.S., But then all of a sudden, it came through in French Polynesia. And then in French Polynesia, we were there an extra month. One, because we had some mechanical issues with the windlass, but that was more like an excuse to stay there a little longer because we didn't have anywhere else to go west. Everything was closed west.
And we're like, where are we going to go now?
Australia closed, as you know. Zealand totally closed. Even American Samoa wouldn't even let us in. Yeah. I'm communicating with the head of the Minister of Health in American Samoa, and he said, no, you can't come here. I said, wait a minute. I just read the U.S. donated $1.2 million of health aid to American Samoa. That's a lot of my tax dollars. Can't we just come in for a couple of days to rest on our way, wherever? Mm-hmm. And they wouldn't let us in, So that's how strict a lot of these places were. Yeah. Vanuatu, we just sailed through the islands of Vanuatu, and luckily they didn't come out and get us. What was the other place? Some of the islands, if you went within 12 miles,
the Solomons.
The Solomons? No, not south of there, where that big volcano was. Tonga. Yeah. They were arresting any boat that came within 12 miles of their shores, and confiscating the boat and making the people go home. Yeah. One boat we heard of, Germans, they sailed into New Zealand, confiscated the boat, shipped them home, and they eventually, a year and a half later, were able to come back to their boat.
Well, the Canadian Mounties almost threw us in jail too.
Yeah, the one guy did. But
yeah. So everything was changing so quickly then with the regulations. And
yep. So
did you have a, I guess if you had a destination you were planning on going to that was like, okay, we're allowed to go there, let's leave now for there, and then it changes and you can't get there.
Right, and that did happen once, So we were in Tahiti. They finally did allow us to leave Tahiti or get into Fiji. They opened up, so it's okay, we're going to go to Fiji. So that worked out very well. Spent a lot of good time in Fiji, one of our favorite places on the whole trip. So we're going to keep moving. We got to get to South Africa by the end of October.
By November 1st.
Yep, because of the typhoon season and the cyclone season. So where are we going to go? So Australia wouldn't let us in. Let's try Indonesia. So round and round Indonesia. Okay, finally get e-visas to go to Indonesia. So
and a lot of other boats we talked to were doing the same thing. Said, okay, we'll all go to Indonesia.
Yeah, to Lombok, Indonesia. That was the plan. Everyone go there together. So sure enough, we got our e-passes. We got a weather window. Let's go. We're about to leave Indonesia. COVID closed and revoked all of the passes.
Yeah.
So.
But if you had a pass.
Yeah, they allowed us to go there and anchor, just couldn't go to shore.
Yeah, and they would sell us fuel and food
and
if you had
do
a
our
visa.
laundry. Yeah. So we at least got to Lombok, to the place we all wanted to go. We got food, fuel, and provisions, and they did our laundry, and then we stayed there for about a week, I think a full 7 days.
week, yeah.
Again, waited for a weather window to cross to go to La Réunion Island, which is a French territory, which they were that was the easiest place of all to get into.
Awesome.
We filled out a form before we left, and we radioed when we got there. They said, yep, we got your paperwork. We go in,
They met
almost
us.
waiting at the dock were the officials. Couple things, double checked our paperwork. Within an hour, we were in a restaurant having dinner.
Yeah, it was amazing.
In there, that was the only place that took less than an hour. Because again, we had already quarantined for 21 days to get there, so there was no issue with quarantine.
Right.
So some places took that into account. Other places, especially early on, did not take that into account. So.
So at what point during the trip did it start to ease up?
That was probably it. Getting into Lombok or
No,
La
mean
Réunion
COVID?
Island. Yeah.
You mean COVID, Isa?
Yeah, that it was like...
Yeah, getting
it
into La
wasn't such a
Réunion
hassle.
Island, I think.
No.
And then even in
It's
South
more
Africa.
like we get to St. Helena's Island and you had to do a COVID test, and we said to the guy, do you wear masks? He goes, oh no, don't wear a mask on shore. COVID has not been here, and if you come ashore wearing a mask, people will think you're
You'll
sick.
scare all the people.
So you can't wear a mask on
Yeah.
St. Helena's Island.
Yeah.
And then we get to Brazil, and they weren't wearing masks there. So that
Right.
was kind of like where
Where it
masks
stopped.
ended for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was- so this is
the spring of 2022.
spring of 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where it started to ease up.
Yeah. So then you only had 6 months and you were back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
We got back Memorial Day weekend. So we made it to Florida. Our kids wanted to plan a homecoming. So he said, when
So
you
we-
coming
we
home?
picked a
So
date.
again, I set a date. Okay, we'll arrive at Colchester Marina at 11 a.m. on the day before, or the Friday of Memorial Day weekend.
Although we did arrive in Florida in April.
Yeah.
So it took us a whole month
To
go
come
the-
back up. We knew we could do it.
We
and
did
we
it
wanted to
very
come up
slowly.
slow because we didn't want to experience cold weather again, because the whole time on our trip we were in summertime. We just planned it that way and
Yeah.
everything.
So we're like, wait a minute, doesn't your old coworker live down here in Florida? Let me give me a call, see if he's still up. So we called him. We spent the night at their house. We
Yep.
went out to dinner. We had a great time. Anybody we knew who
Along the
lived
way.
along the way, we stopped and see. Our daughter-in-law's mother, we stopped and we visited them.
Yeah.
Anybody, yeah.
Yeah. So we just slowly came up, mostly on the ICW, went through the dismal swamp,
Yeah, that was kinda
stayed
cool.
overnight there and everything, and just slowly come up. And once we got into the Chesapeake Bay, we could have been here within 24 hours, but we were like about 5 days early.
Yeah, so we visited a friend of a friend who
Yeah.
lives on the Wye River.
Yeah.
Spent the night there.
Anchored out a few places. Went to the Naval Academy to watch the air
Blue
show,
Angels,
the
yeah.
Blue Angel air show for the
We're
Academy's
here
graduation.
we're like 5 hours from Colchester.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we got another day to go.
The day before,
So,
we anchored out.
We anchored across the bay.
Across the bay, and at 11 o'clock exactly on the button, we come rolling into
Well,
Colchester.
not only
Marina.
that, it's like we're crossing the bay and here's a ship coming. It's like, oh no, that ship is going to block our entrance
Yeah.
to Colchester.
It was kind of
So it's
foggy
like,
too that
we
morning.
had to we went a little bit south so we could cross the channel way in front of the ship so
Yeah.
we could be on the inside.
Yeah, yep, and there's a lot of people here waiting for us, and it's kind of
Yeah,
cool.
and the Baltimore TV station was there.
Yeah, had a good celebration.
Yeah.
So the whale, we were talking about that, but were we was that in anything?
I don't know.
Oh, we can tell it again.
Yeah.
I don't think you talked about the whale.
So we were in Alaska, in Glacier Bay National Park, viewing all the glaciers and so forth. It was kind of nice. And then one day we were in essentially this bay of Glacier Bay National Park.
Reed Glacier.
The Reed Glacier, yep. The Reed Glacier doesn't calve, which means the ice from the glacier doesn't fall into the ocean or into the water. It has receded so far, it doesn't calve anymore. Mm-hmm. So it was very calm there. Middle of the night, we're playing cards or some game. Marlene and I and our buddy Craig Smith were on the boat. And around midnight, we decided to go to bed. So we go to bed. Or about 12:15 or so, the boat rocked. And we go, what the heck caused that rock? Typically a motorboat passing by would cause it. Something nearby would cause that rock. And we didn't know. So turns out we get up simultaneously. Craig gets up because he felt the rocking of the boat also. And we couldn't figure it out. So we're looking out the windows and we finally see some whales behind the boat off the aft quarter there, kind of splashing around. And we go, oh, there must have been a whale came by the boat. And so we're looking out the port windows and so forth. And I've heard that, you want to make some noise so the whales will avoid you. And I was about to go up and start the engine, but it was kind of cold out, and everything. And I didn't want to, I was in my skivvies, so I didn't go up and start the engine. And next thing we know, we see a whale go by and spout.
Yeah, we're all standing up on the bench looking out these windows. He's like 10, 15
feet away from the window. He just comes up, big spout. We recognized it was a big humpback whale. Comes up and goes down, and we never saw that whale again. But then right after that whale went by, after his tail went in the water, we see this thing coming at us, and it looked like a World War II torpedo. And I realized this whale is coming right at us, And so I braced myself. So did Craig. Apparently Marlene didn't put it two and two together.
So I'm standing up here and I actually flew to that side of the boat.
Yeah, when the whale hit us. It just smacked us.
Yeah.
Broadside, hit the keel, and the boat rocked. It's just like the boat ran into a cement wall, It was just amazing, the noise, everything shuddered. And we go, did that just really happen? We just were amazed. And the poor whale, we felt the whale, hurt himself big time, just the force of it all. Checked the bilge right away. Bilge pump wasn't turning on or anything, no leaks, Took us about an hour or so to settle down, and we felt we were okay,
Well, one thing we did is I said, okay, we're going to write this down right now. It's all fresh in our minds and the story doesn't change.
Right.
What exactly just happened to us?
Yeah. So we're on agreement.
We wrote it all down.
Yeah. What happened, we did that because a few days earlier we were at the visitor center and we see this area where there was a skeleton of a large humpback whale. It was a female and then a small baby whale. Turns out that whale got hit by a cruise ship in the park and killed that whale. That cruise ship was fined $500,000.
So we're like, we
did not want to be fined $500,000.
We did not kill a whale.
And we want to get our story straight, and so we're all in agreement, and that's what the story was. Yeah. We all saw it the exact same way. We called the Rangers soon afterwards. They said, yeah, it's very, very rare, but sometimes it happens. They don't know why. We thought maybe there was a baby whale there, so maybe they thought we were provoking it. It could have been another whale because they're about the same size.
Said we're about the size of a whale.
Yep. Could have been just a mistake. Nobody knows, but we got smacked by a whale. 2 weeks later, we're finally leaving Alaska and heading back toward the state of Washington. And now we're outside in the ocean. We went around Vancouver Island. And we're in the ocean, and typically when we're in the ocean a couple times a day, I'm checking the bilge and everything just to make sure it's all okay. And at one point I checked the bilge when the sun was quite low near sunset. I opened up down below and I'm looking and I can see daylight shining through. And that normally doesn't occur because it's all enclosed underwater, And what happened, we made arrangements to have the boat hauled in Washington State. And sure enough, there was a gouge about 6-8 inches in diameter where it looked like just a big chunk came out of the fiberglass. The fiberglass down there is about an inch thick and left 2 layers of fiberglass that was protecting the boat from sinking. And there was also kind of a crack that went up, looked like kind of a tadpole, if you will. And so we were very lucky the boat didn't sink. They patched it up for us and anchored us, and we were on our way after that. So that's our whale story. That was very frightening for a while, for about the first hour or so after it hit us.
Yeah.
Just the first hour.
Yeah. So
it was something. We think we would have started the engine and tried to run aground.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't sink.
Yeah.
Because there was kind of like a beachy, a rocky beachy area.
Yeah. And it was actually right in front of us. It was rocky beachy, if you will. But if we would have gone toward the glacier, it was all silty.
Yeah.
It would have been a soft landing, if you will.
Yeah.
If you made it.
We would have made it. Well, I think so.
It wasn't. We weren't that far from it.
We didn't
that
have the
hard.
bilge pump. The bilge pump, like I said, wasn't even running. The bilge pump pumps out quite a bit, and
Yeah.
plus we have a hand pump, and so. That's actually after that I rigged up an emergency bilge pump. So down there is another bilge pump that we can use and flip that on anytime we want, with a hose that we would just stick out the window and stuff like that. So it's a temporary setup, but it's a whole nother bilge pump that we can use if we need to.
Can you talk about food a little bit?
Food.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, knowing that I was living on this boat for at least 2.5 years, I had in my mindset that this is my kitchen, just like at home. I'm going to cook like I cooked at home, with one exception is mostly everything turned out to be a one-pot meal, and we ate out of bowls most of the time. But I just thought there's no reason why I can't cook or bake like I did when I was home. So that was basically my goal, that this is my home and my kitchen. So, and that's what I did. And I even learned how to bake bread, so which was kind of cool. I made sourdough bread, got a starter in Maui, and it's still alive today. So yeah, that was cool. And
a lot of the dishes she would take pictures of and post them, and people were saying how we were eating so much better than they were back home.
on the
And
boat, yeah.
and she saved all the recipes and things, and
Well,
it
most
was
of them were made up recipes. Like,
yeah.
you know, you see one recipe and you see another, and you have these ingredients and you have some of these, and so I would just mix them together, and it always turned out.
Yep.
So it's good.
Especially when we were, on shore, at a dock, at anchor, or something like that, the food was fantastic. If we were on passage and it was windy and wavy and the boat's 15 or so degrees, I'm cooking dinner, which was typically peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Or
and I'm
if
doing the
they-
dishes. and stuff.
Crossing from Hawaii or California to Hawaii, the boat was healing quite a bit, and I just pass up the peanut butter and jelly. So
Yeah.
here's your dinner. You make it
What was your
yourself.
longest? Your longest?
The longest passage was crossing the Indian Ocean, 21 days.
And so, how did you prepare for that for 21 days to have food? Just mostly dry food?
Well, we had a lot of canned foods.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had like canned chicken, and tuna.
Yep.
And whenever we would, towards the end of the trip or the middle, whenever we would provision, we really stocked up on fresh produce. So we tried to consume fresh produce first, and then we would go to the canned foods. So we would use, like we would make a dish that had lots of vegetables, or we would have fruit for lunch,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Pasta meals, rice meals, all good.
Yeah.
For that crossing, we actually provisioned for over 40 days.
We did.
Because we were expecting it to take 35 days. But because of the wind conditions, it was just gorgeous wind the whole way, and we were there in 21 days.
Yeah.
So we always had way too much provisions on the
Yeah, you
boat
did.
than we consumed.
But we realized having apple and peanut butter for lunch was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Or cheese with crackers, or a pineapple. We didn't have to have a huge meal for lunch, or even breakfast for that matter.
Right.
And actually, Pop-Tarts became the breakfast of champions. Pop-Tarts on a boat is awesome.
Yeah.
Brown sugar cinnamon,
No.
All kinds.
strawberry,
Strawberry.
Mostly
Strawberry or blueberry, frosted, yeah.
with sprinkles.
With sprinkles.
Yeah.
Yeah. We never bought a lot of fresh meats because it was, we didn't have our refrigeration really needs some help, actually. We didn't have a way to
The refrigerator worked.
control the temperature very
Right.
well. So we ended up manually turning on and off the breakers for the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you wanted to keep something frozen, everything everything would freeze. So it's like if you really wanted something frozen, you had to put it right on the cold plate, which means we can't have a whole lot of food that's frozen. So we basically didn't.
Right. Yeah, not too much frozen food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't fish a lot. We weren't very good at it.
We were okay at it.
We were okay fishing, but
Yeah.
we didn't like killing the fish.
We didn't like killing
We didn't like killing the fish.
or cleaning the fish,
Yeah.
so especially the killing part.
Yeah, that was hard.
Yeah.
It's flopping around.
We tried different techniques. One fish we caught, we heard that, okay, you put alcohol in the gills, and we felt so bad. We we gave the fish really good rum.
Mount Gay rum.
Mount Gay rum, and so the
Didn't
fish
work.
died a happy death. But it took forever, you know. So that technique didn't work, and so anyway,
Yeah.
we didn't do a lot of fishing. Yeah.
So do you have some favorite meals from the trip that you created that you still eat today? It's like, oh yeah, we're having this tonight.
A lot of the rice dishes still. We have rice and vegetables,
Yeah.
very similar.
Lots of vegetables.
I mean, obviously, pasta meals, you know,
Yeah.
they worked out really good. The big thing is I still often eat in the same size
bowl.
type
In a
bowl
bowl.
at home that we did on the boat, you know. You guys saw the bowls. They're coralware, deep coralware bowls. So I still use those at home. Because
Yeah.
you get used to it. Yeah.
There's a lot of soups we made too, because they last a long time. Or if
Yeah.
I would make a pasta dish, I'd like make the whole box.
Yeah.
And so now we have enough for like maybe 4 days.
Yeah. Good leftovers.
And that was always good. We have a microwave, so you can just heat it up or throw it on a stove.
Yep.
Yeah. I use the oven like it was my oven at home. Even bake. Dan wanted cookies.
Yep.
So we baked some chocolate chip cookies.
Right.
But the oven is so small and the cookie sheets are so small, you can only bake 6 cookies at a time. So
Took
you can
forever.
imagine how long that's going to take to do an entire batch of chocolate chip cookies. So it takes forever.
Yeah.
But,
So finally we did it.
And I didn't have a mixer,
Right.
so I put it all in a blender.
Yeah.
And then at one point we did buy a hand mixer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we used that, but
And then we had cookies. We just filled the whole cookie tray
made bars
and made
instead.
cookie bars
Yeah.
rather than individual
Yeah.
cookies, and
Yeah.
much quicker that way.
Yeah.
So are your recipes on your blog or anything?
There are some that I did post the recipe with the pictures. Some I didn't.
So they're all, and
Uh,
she still has all the recipes on her own.
On my phone.
What's the application?
Paprika 3.
Paprika 3 is
It's
the
a
application.
recipe app. It's
Yeah.
You have to pay for it. It's not free. But you can just find any recipe online and just hit the little download button, and it downloads the ingredients, the photo, and the directions, nutritional information, everything you want to know about the recipe right there in your phone. So, you know, you're out in the middle of the ocean and say, well, I have chicken and I have a green pepper. I can plug in those things, and it'll come up with recipes that use those ingredients.
Oh,
So it's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah,
It's a good app.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we made sourdough pizza,
We did.
sourdough scones, sourdough
We
bread,
made
obviously.
Bread. We made muffins.
Muffins.
Dinner rolls.
Yep. So she was getting really clever with that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The pizza was.
We ate
best.
really well. Didn't
Yeah.
lose weight, you know, coming home or anything. Yeah.
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 It's,
We over provisioned. We brought stuff. We were cleaning out the boat when we got back. Oh, we took that with us. You know? that came from our old house.
yeah. We bought a lot of canned vegetables in French Polynesia.
Right.
But they were the little
The small
cans.
cans, yeah.
And
For
they
two of
came in
us.
a 9-pack, so you
Yeah.
had to buy 9 of them. But they were really useful because, like, you have canned carrots, and you could just throw the carrots in a recipe with like rice or whatever, and I mean, it like worked out great.
Yep. We still have some of those.
We still have some carrot. No, we have beans. I don't think we have carrots
Right.
left. Yeah.
Beans and corn.
We're still using them.
Yeah.
Our little cans. Not expired yet. Yeah.
So how do people find your blog if they want to read about your trip?
It's www.sailingtrance.com.
Yep. Sailingtrance.com as well as Sailing Trance on Facebook.
And
So we keep a
Instagram.
Facebook page and Instagram, too.
Instagram.
Yeah. So you can look through those, and we're still maintaining the Sailing Trance Facebook page. In
And there's-
fact, we'll put an entry about what we did the last couple of days. We need to take a selfie.
Yep.
Yeah.
If we haven't done, have we done? No, we haven't
No, we
done that
didn't
yet.
do
We'll do
We have
that
to do that.
before we leave.
Before
Yeah.
dark.
It's required.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you have another adventure planned?
It isn't totally planned yet, but we're considering Nova Scotia next summer. So the plans would be Nova Scotia. We'd like to do Bermuda and the Caribbean, and that might be a trip to Bermuda and then down to the Caribbean for the season, if you will. lots of boats just go down for the winter season, that type of thing. So we just kind of blew through the Caribbean. On the way down, we went around the western side of Cuba. So we didn't even stop on the way down. We went from Fort Lauderdale to Panama, 11-day trip, nonstop. On the way back, we stopped just 2 places in Barbados and St. Thomas. And so we've just blown through the Caribbean and haven't really explored the Caribbean at all. And just like this summer, we're exploring the Chesapeake Bay. We haven't really explored the Chesapeake Bay. We just went up and practiced and didn't really stop too many places. So now we're getting to know home. So, people often said 2.5 years. That's really fast. In reality, the fastest you can kind of go around the globe in a sailboat is 18 months. And if you ever heard of the Ark cruise, World Ark, they do it. It's kind of an organized rally. They organize it. You pay money to this group that organizes it. They take care of all the entry stuff going in and out of countries. And they do it in 18 months around the world. That's like the fastest you can do it climate-wise. We did it in 2.5 years because of the Alaska detour. And where was I? But people criticized us for doing it so fast, But we did it. It was
According to the Ark, you took an extra year to see more things.
To see more
Right,
things.
yeah.
And that's the way we wanted to do it. We didn't want to be away from our grandkids that long. We didn't want to leave the boat anywhere for a long period of time and fly home. That said, we know people that have been out there over a decade. A couple we met from Toledo, Ohio, are still out there, haven't made it home yet. They have parked their boat, flew home for a month or two, flew back a number of times, but they're in the Caribbean now working their way back home if they ever decide to come home. Maybe they'll go through the canal again and keep on going,
Great.
So they're very nice people, down to earth. Had a great time with them. We spent a lot of time with them while in South Africa. But they stayed in South Africa for a year. We were there, 5 weeks maybe.
Right.
So
Right.
big difference. Yeah. So.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Awesome couple days.
Thank you for your hospitality.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh, you bet. Thank you.
Borrow
Oh,
the
that's what
battery.
that means. The battery's about to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad it worked out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate you calling me and arranging this.